Everyone out there, thank you for tuning in here. I just want to show you guys the contract that I use to assign all of my deals in real estate. Okay, so pretty much I wholesale out of Texas and I use the TREC 1.4, and I already have that contract in my YouTube video is on my YouTube channel, and as well as how to get access to that contract. But here is the assignment contract. Okay, so this particular contract is really neat. It's very firm, and I like it because it's short and sweet and it gets to the point. So pretty much this is what the blank contract looks like, and the link is going to be in the video description, so you can get straight to it. It's going to be in my Google Drive, so you can download this contract and use it to assign your equitable interest to your cash buyers. Okay, so this is the contract between you and the cash buyer. All right, so obviously you see here the subject property, legal description. The assigner is you. The assignee is the person that receives, right? So think of assignee as the person receiving, which is going to be your buyer. Assignor is you. Assignee is your buyer, okay? Subject property goes here. And assignor is you. And then you're going to have the actual name of the person that is the owner of the property at the time, which is the seller. Okay, that's why I like this contract. You have the wholesaler here, the cash buyer here, and then you have the actual property owner right here, and it just involves everyone in the contract, which is what I like. Okay, obviously right here you're going to put the purchase agreement price that you have. No, I'm sorry, you're going to put the price here that is going to be whatever your assignment fee is included, including your purchase agreement price. So say for instance you have the contract at 100,000 between you and the seller, and then you and the cash buyer say we want to do 130. Okay, so that's going to be a $30,000 payday for you. Between you and the seller is a $100,000 contract. And then between you and your buyer, you have verbally agreed at 130, and you're trying to get that in writing right now. You're going to put 130 right here. Assignee shall pay the amount of $130,000 for the property. The assignment fee to a signer is included. Okay, so make sure you do not put your contract price here, because you're not going to get anything. Right here, you have to put the number that is higher than what you and the seller has agreed upon. That goes right here. Okay, and then I like this contract because it actually has a closing date. I've seen contracts, assignment contracts, that just does not have a closing date, okay? And legally, you can come with a buyer that can just really try to hold you on that. And if you let them sign that contract legally, you have pretty much told them that there isn't a closing date set. And if that property is going through pre-foreclosure or something like that, and that buyer knows it's in pre-foreclosure, some of these cash buyers don't want to buy the properties at the price. They want it to go to the auction and bid on it. And then you're stuck, and then you're in some type of legal bind. They put a memo on the property, it can get really nasty. So you want to make sure you just have a closing date set, right? You want to go ahead and have all this verbally understood before you get to writing. You know the price is going to be good. They're okay with assignment fees, and you don't have to tell them how much the assignment fee is going to be. They will figure that out at closing on the HUD statement. If they like the price that you have negotiated with them, they're okay with the assignment fee. Rather be $100,000, $5,000, $30,000, $40,000 assignment fee. If they say, hey, that price works for me, then they're going to go ahead and agree to the price here. And then you're going to tell them, hey, on my contract, let's say today is March 7th. You'll say, hey, on March 20th is when my contract expires. Can you close before then? Yeah, I can close by the 15th. And then you'll put closing to take place on or before March 15th, right? Or March 17th, March 18th. You just want that closing to be before the expiration date on your contract between you and the seller. Okay? Hope that makes sense. All right, now this is the very important thing. You always want to make sure your cash buyer puts down earnest money on the agreement. I've seen contracts where they sign for the contract price and the assignment fee price. They put it here. There's no closing date and there's no earnest money. So you literally let a buyer lock up your deal as the buyer legally with no closing date and no earnest money. How do you know that buyer is going to perform? And you got somebody that is literally depending upon you to perform, and you don't even really have your buyer locked in. You have to have a closing date in your contract, and you have to have earnest money. Okay, then you want to put where the earnest money is going to go. If you don't have a title company figured out yet, but by this time you should. If not, you'll just put to be determined and held by, title company to be determined. And then the title company is where the title work is going to happen for closing. Okay. And then you want to put the additional terms here in this blank space, which is talking about no option period and things like that. And I have an example filled out I'm going to show you, but I just want to go through this stuff and what it's saying, which is why I like this, okay? A signer, which is you, and affiliated associates make no warranty expressed or implied regarding inspection reports or other reports provided to a signee cash buyer by a signer, who is you, or third parties concerning this property. A signee cash buyer is advised to independently verify the accuracy of all information contained in reports regarding this properties being sold as is, okay? So they can't say, oh, well, you said this is going to be this way. This is going to be repaired here, and it was going to have this new roof. No, as is. Assignee cash buyer to cover all closing costs associated with the transaction, okay? Assignee cash buyer acknowledged assigner wholesaler does not own title to subject property. Rather, an equitable interest was created by the original contract with seller and is being assigned for the above mentioned fee. Assigner, wholesaler, cannot make any representation or warranty to subject property. Okay, here we go. It's getting good here. This is very important here. If deposit is held by escrow and assignee, which is the cash buyer, okay, fails to close by date above, see, that's why it's important to have this date. Assignee, cash buyer, instructs escrow, title company, to immediately release that earnest money, okay, to the wholesaler, which is you. Assignee, cash buyer, immediately forfeits deposit as liquidated damages, and all rights, title, and interest pursuant to the purchase and sale agreement shall automatically revert to the assigner without notice. That's why it's important to have earnest money and a date, because if they don't perform by that date, that earnest money they put down, it goes to you. And if this property gets canceled by between you and the cash buyer, because you're between you and the seller, because the cash buyer couldn't perform, they put earnest money down. That money goes to you, so at least you get something out of the deal, and you get some of that money to the cash to the seller because your buyer got janky, right? And so that's why it's important, y'all, to know what kind of contracts you are using when you're doing these wholesale deals. You got to have the right information in there to protect you and to cover you, all right? That's why it's important to have earnest money, and it's why it's important to have an actual closing date on your assignment contract, okay? And on your contract between you and the seller. You want to have all of that, okay? That's why I like the TREC. Here we go. This contract is contingent upon a signer, which is you, obtaining clear and marketable subject title to the subject property, meaning that you can get clear title on the home. It's going to be good to close. If title is unable to be provided by a specified closing date, a signer, because if you can't get clear title by the closing date between you and your cash buyer, you got to get that buyer back their earnest money. That's fair, right? So if clear title is unable to be provided by a specified closing date, a signer or wholesaler will immediately return deposit in full to a signee, cash buyer, and this contract terminates with no further obligations for either party. Okay? So that means if you can't perform and if there's any negligence on your side as a wholesaler, and by you being the wholesaler, also the seller of the property, if there's negligence on your side, you cannot do that to that cash buyer. You can't hold their money and you don't perform by the closing date, because they may have other things they got to do. They may have another deal and they got EMD tied up here and it's not closing. You can't hold their money. And this is another way to kind of ensure that your cash buyer is protected. And cash buyers like to see stuff like this in writing. And you tell them as well, what this pretty much says is if I can't get clear title, or if there's any negligence on my side, you're going to get your earnest money back. And they're going to be like, okay, I like that. So that's how you and your cash buyer operate. And this contract spells out the entire transaction with a signer, wholesaler, and a signee cash buyer. No other verbal or any other prior agreements supersedes this agreement. You print your name and you sign. They print their name and their sign, okay? And let me just go ahead and show you what an example looks like filled out. All right. So this is not a property that I have on a contract. This is the property that was in foreclosure. I don't know if they're in it still, but they got out of it. But the auction was months ago, so more than likely they canceled it. But this is just an example, okay? You got the property address here, and then you have the legal description, okay? Now, with the and or sign here, which is going to be you, either it's going to be your first and your last name and or sign, or the name of your LLC and or sign. Do not have both of these on here. It just needs to be one or the other, guys. Your first, last name and or sign, and then or your LLC and or sign as the assigner. Say it's House Flippers of Houston LLC. It's a cash buyer. There's a subject property there. And then again, you're going to put your name here or your company name and or sign. And then Jessica Beck, right? And that's going to be the seller of this property. I like this contract again because it has the wholesaler, it has the cash buyer, and it has the original sale of the property. So everything is binding. That's why I like it. Okay. And say for instance you got that contract between you and Ms. Beck at 100,000, and then you and the cash buyer say you want to do 140. It's going to be a $40,000 payday. You're going to put that amount there. Okay. That's going to be how they include the assignment fee. You're going to put the closing date. Okay. You want to put the EMD, and then the title company, and then here you're going to put your name or your LLC's name. Assigner, wholesaler made payable to, blah, 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 blah. Assignee is to place a down payment in the amount of $3,000 with assigner made payable to, bam, and held by a title company, bam. If you don't have the title company, you'll just put TBD, to be determined, okay? Now, this is what was blank on the other contract, but I have it filled out here, okay? This is very important. Buyer to pay all closing costs, not including unpaid taxes and liens, but includes title policy insurance. They cannot have an option period in this contract. No option period. If you have a cash buyer that wants an option period, run. It's not good, because what an option period means, only person that needs an option period is you and the seller. Because if you can't get a buyer on that contract, you need to be able to back out of it. And there's an option period in the TREC. So if you're wholesaling and you're using another contract, you better have an option period, because if you can't get a cash buyer, you can't perform on that contract. You need to be able to get out of that contract by that option period deadline. But when it comes down to between you and your buyer, right, between you, the wholesaler, and the cash buyer, there's no option period. Why? Let me explain. Because this cash buyer, if they know they have an option period, they know they have the time to think about if they want to buy the property. And they have it on the contract, which means you can't market that deal anymore and you can't get another buyer on the contract. When there's no option period, that means that they can literally decide if they want to buy this house or not. They can just sit back, scratch their ears, kick their feet up on the couch, enjoy whatever they want to do, and be like, I got that property on the contract and I can back out of it and I don't have to answer to anyone. And you got a distressed property owner, a distressed seller that is depending upon you. No option period ever in the assignment contract, and you got to make sure that's in there. Okay. Here's another thing as well. EMD is to be delivered to the title company no later than 48 hours upon signing the contract. If you got a cash buyer and they want to buy this deal, they got to deliver that earnest money within 48 hours of signing the contract. If not, this contract they sign is canceled and you go get you a new buyer. You don't have time to play. Don't let them sweet talk you. Don't let them play you. You have to be very firm and very, very intentional with these cash buyers. And if they ask you, man, what's the real, man? Closing it isn't until 45 days, 30 days, and you tell them this. You are an experienced real estate investor. Hopefully you are. You know how things can happen. I need to know that you're serious about buying this property. It's not personal, it's just business. I need you to put down that earnest money within 40 hours upon signing, or I'm going to have to get a buyer that can. I got to secure this deal. I have a distressed property owner, and it's bigger than me. It's bigger than you. It's about this owner, and it's about this deal, and I got to perform. And I hope you understand that. And if it's a buyer you trust, you have experience, that could be negotiated. You can work through it and things like that, right? And then sometimes, you know what? On some of these deals, this is the only buyer that is even looking at it. I've had deals where I've sent it to so many buyers, and there's only one buyer that wants it. And guess what? Sometimes they kind of have their way with this stuff. I've had it to where somebody's like, I'm not putting $3,000 down. I put down $1,000. And I'm like, oh, and then when it gets my grain, and guess what? They performed. And then they said, well, I'm not going to be able to do it, but I do need an option period. And I'm like, oh, but then you've had this deal on the contract for weeks and nobody has hopped on it. And time's ticking. But you got a buyer that's like, hey, I'm going to need another week or two. I can't close by the 20th, but I'm going to need another week or two. And then also I'm going to need to do $1,000 on earnest money. And then on top of that, like, I am going to need an option period, because if I can't get lending on it, because I don't have the money, Steven, I can get lending on it. I really want the property, but it's just going to cost a lot of money, or it's in a flood zone, or it's just a little janky, but I want the deal. I want to come under contract, right? So you have those situations, and I've had them before. I had a deal where I had a property on 10 acres in Alvin, and it was a beautiful, beautiful piece of property, but it needed work. Nobody wanted to jump on it because it was a big house and people were wanting to flip it, but the property was actually converted into a duplex. That's how big it was. And I had a buyer who was a buy and hold investor, but she was raising capital for the deal. So she needed 45 days to raise the funds. And I told my buyer I was going to close in like 3 weeks. So I had to go back to I told my seller I was going to be able to close in 3 weeks. I had to go back to the seller and say, hey, look, I need 45 days. He was like, you know what? That's fine. I'm not going to be leaving. He was moving out of state. He's like, I'm not going to be leaving for another 2 months. I can do 45 days. What's going on? And I was like, perfect. It all worked out. So, sometimes you have to go back and renegotiate these things between you and the seller so that you and the buyer can come on an agreement to make it work. And then it may not be the sexiest terms, right? It may not be 3K, it may be 1,000, right? It just depends on what's going on with the deal. But if you know it's a good deal, high comps, low days on market, it's a great ARV, contract is good, like you can get a buyer on it, then you got to be firm on this. You got to be firm on it. All right. So just know when you got to be flexible. Don't let them run over you. But sometimes like you are kind of at their mercy because the deal is just not the sexiest, but they're interested. And sometimes you just got to work with it. But you still want to make sure you still hold them to a standard so you can get the deal across the table. Okay. And then last but not least, taxes are to be paid based upon proration. And I run into some issue with taxes before because I didn't have the taxes and prorations in the assignment contract. I had a buyer that wanted prorated taxes and the title company didn't want to give it to him. I was like, why? It was like, well, it wasn't in the contract, but I need to do it to get this deal across the table. So I had to eat some of the taxes. It was crazy. It was crazy. So just make sure you guys have this in your assignment contracts. Taxes are to be paid based upon prorations. Okay. So hopefully this all makes sense here. Obviously, you know what this is all about, guys. And then yeah, that's the same. So hopefully this all makes sense. Hopefully this adds value, guys. Like, comment, and subscribe to this video, or like and comment on this video, and then subscribe to my channel so we can get more valuable content out here for these wholesalers, for you wholesalers in 2023. I want you guys to win. I want you guys to succeed. I know what it feels like. And this is a copy of my assignment contract that I use on all of my wholesale deals in Houston, Texas, and you can use it as well anywhere in the United States where there's wholesaling. And again, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not a licensed anyone that's out here, telling you what you should do and what you should not be doing. This is just a video showing what I do in my business, and you can do whatever you want to do. I just really strongly suggest that you give it your own attorney, you give it your own licensed, person that has everything by the law, that is, regulated to do such things. I strongly suggest you give it these people before doing any of these things that I'm telling you or I'm showing you that I'm doing. I don't want to be held liable for that, but this is just, insight into what I do and how I make a living for myself. I hope that all makes sense, guys. Take care. God bless. And I'll see you soon.